Welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings here in Mendham and such. I was going to start this video during the day, okay, and make it in pieces and see how it would evolve. Blah blah blah. It didn't happen. Always some kind of distraction or too tired or some excuse, and just going to be a very different video than I imagined it when I conceived it, in terms of what do you talk about? Still working on this contraction of getting to the essence of the argument, and then just driving the essences into human awareness somehow. So the video 3 videos ago was basically just a description of the fact that we're just bugs. Okay, it's just a fact, just little robotic bugs gurgitating culture and all kinds of other meme nonsense, and it's all kind of determined. And the idea though is that fortunately, determinism in this case, where you're an intelligent organism, kind of means that you'll progressively tend to keep right answers rather than wrong answers. So we're in a period, the last 300 years, where human beings been not advancing very well, frankly. I guess not that they did it great from, you could go all the way back 2000 BC and just, how long it took them to just do penicillin, so it is an awful long road to travel, a big long trail of tears to get to the smarter future. And right now, like I said, it looks like, culturally, we're in the sewer. And there's the mechanisms of civilization are sort of degrading into mobs, and they're not very smart mobs, dumber, and Republicans and dumb Democrats are just not very good. Anyway, so the subject was just going to be a think video, that's our major advantage as a bug, is that we can do all of this thinking. We can think about, in terms of discovering or finding a problem, and then we can think about solutions. And I've always sort of made this point, like what made it interesting to me, I would say, is sometime in my, late teens, I might argue, was the idea of recognizing this idea of a straight line, between a problem and a solution. And so you want to find the quickest and most efficient way to get to the solution, not the hardest, most silly, convoluted way. But the problem is that there's all these conditions that you have to find your solution in, where you can't just kill the problem often. You have to play fair, and so it makes solving problems more difficult. And then the other thing, as my piece of insight, whatever, my observation was that the trick is that often the problem is not in the stars, Horatio. It's in our own expectations, desires, ambitions, drives, all that kind of crap. The problem isn't it's like the problem isn't that you can't control her and she doesn't love you, or something like, it can just be that, well, maybe you just don't need to bother loving her, and then the problem is solved. Something like that. Like, you don't need what you think needs to happen, what you think is the problem. Your hero is not winning. Maybe you just need a different hero. Something like that. So the problem is often our own needs as we think they exist. Like you need to go somewhere, you need to get something, or you need to have something, and maybe you really don't need it. And maybe you're better off if you don't go get it. You don't solve that problem by finding a way to feed the problem. You find the solution by just eliminating the problem itself. All right, long way to say, obviously for all of these people clinging to life is precious and wonderful, we must have more of it, we must have more. Obviously they could just let go of this notion that they actually care about the long future, because they demonstrate that they don't care about their own kids' future. Right? They demonstrate that they will pollute the world and do all kinds of crap and create all unsustainable mechanisms because they really just don't give a shit, okay, about the future if it's going to cost them anything, any inconvenience. So, yeah, let's just let go of this lie, okay, that you're all, have desperate need to be assured that there's going to be a long future, for human antics. No, you don't really think so, just like you never shed any tears because there's no people on Mars getting divorces and killing their kids and all the other bullshit that people do. I mean, the bullshit people do, you just, you never used to hear about it. I guess, this crazy crap used to always go on, all these psychos doing all these psycho-y things. And you just never made the news, because it is a different world, I just gotta say, and so that's one of my problems, is that, the world's changed so much that it's hard to find any part of it that you can just, relate to or in any way see point, purpose, or progress in, it all looks like some kind of backward slide into buggery and such. So thinking can be applied to finding problems and finding solutions. That's basically what brains are for, is to recognize a problem. Tree is in my way. Find solution around tree. Okay. I can just keep using silly analogies, but I just mean, the problems for early men were, there's bears, and, you don't want to go to the raspberry bushes when the bears are there, that kind of thing. So you have to find solutions. You have to try to travel there like jumping from tree to tree or some other kind of bullshit. You have to find your trick, your solution. But the solution can't mean risking your death and all this other kind of stuff. So you have to measure and balance all of these questions about, how big is that risk? How bad is that risk, actually? All kinds of crap like that. And you have to do that in the context of a psychology, okay, that, does exaggerate, makes you think something's going to be worse than it really is. Almost makes you think that if you step on a crack, it will break your mother's back. So we're superstitious, and we tend to, think we're jinxed or some other kind of, silliness. And, that there's voodoo in the universe. It's a real problem that we're susceptible to those kinds of aberrant brain functions that I guess weren't a big problem when we were cavemen. I mean, it wasn't a big problem. Getting some compulsive disorder where you turn a light switch on and off 17 times because there was no light switches, so you didn't have to worry about that compulsion. We didn't have to. There was no cracks in a sidewalk, that kind of thing. So, no sidewalk, so you didn't have to worry about breaking your mother's back, I guess. Anyway. All right, so that's where I was heading, is just this idea. Now I was going to, there's so many of these subjects that I've gone over in the past, and it's just, this is the frustrating part, is that, there are a lot of subjects where you can talk about the right to die and ways to make it fail safe, where you really don't have to worry that some poor victim is going to be unsuspectingly psychotic and, say they want to die when they really want to live, and they don't, blah, 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 all that philosophical crap, where all that nonsense where they argue some kind of argument where somehow you can't prevent some kind of horror. And then just because it comes up for me now and then with the cigarette thing, clearly there's an advantage in preventing children from becoming nicotine addicts, but you don't do that by way overtaxing the current addicts. That's not going to solve that problem. And it's certainly not going to solve it if you just start isolating and just saying that people can't smoke in public and people can't do that, and kids even, because then they just go, in the abandoned building, or they go, you're just creating gangs in a way. You're creating a separation between you and the bad behavior that just kind of guarantees you'll have no control over it and no ability to try to, in a passive way, correct the problem. You're just putting the problem, you're trying to, you're shoving the problem in a place you can't see or control, and that doesn't give you more power, it gives you less power. So it's that kind of thing. Like, there's always, these are subjects, and so democracy was a subject of, I don't know, I wrote about it 30 years ago, 40, that it has these, it's a really outhouse kind of version of a democracy. We have this really crude democracy in the sense that it was established at a time when we didn't have any technology. You couldn't travel 20 miles without taking you 2 days. Lots of things. And so, we had this geographic democracy, where you were really just some possession of a location, and you weren't an ideological perspective. And so we basically created a democracy where segregation wins. If you're a cult or a group and you can take over an area, you can gain, you can magnify your political power. But if you are spread out and you're a nice guy and you get along with everybody, and so you can live anywhere, well, then you're going to get no political representation. So there's so many ironies to that story, where blacks would have never had any congressional representation if it wasn't for the evil of segregation. So and so a democracy that that is that broken, in the sense of it only gives you power if something horrible is done to you. That's really not good. So it should be one man, one vote, all that kind of stuff. I mean, to create a Senate that's basically controlled, by these tiny states, with these little nutty, farm people, or, people with narrow perspectives, narrow lifestyles. And they get a huge, disproportionate capacity to write laws, and that's silly. I mean, a person living in California essentially has, 1/25th of the voting power of somebody in Alaska. I mean, just a huge disproportion in their capacity to, see their agenda respected in government. Um, and so, and now that we're currently in this whole immigration thing and the immigrants really don't want to become, true Americans. They're going to keep their language. They're going to keep their culture. They're just creating, new islands of, Mexico or whatever, Iran or, Vietnam, whatever it is. They're going to create a new little island of it here. And that's going to get rewarded. That's the way you take over America is basically just to create a bunch of these little nations that will have disproportional voting power. Anyway, so you fix it by just getting rid of the geography thing. So you're not owned by a state. You're not owned by a county. You're not owned by your town. Your identity isn't where you live. Ironically, I got a website, a channel called Inmendham, but that's just, it's not a seriously catastrophic irony. I'm just saying, and there's no implication that I'm saying it's a positive thing. But yeah, it's just very negative that we've established a democracy that's geographically based and not one where we're just the problem is representation and the solution, is a system that actually provides that everybody gets a fair and equal voice in the democracy. So this relates sort of, like I said, the cigarette smoking thing really demonstrated the failure of democracy because, yes, the cigarette smokers are spread all over the whole country, but they're a minority in every single state. So you can do things to them, and they can't fight back because they don't have any political representation. They can't win any elections, because they all don't live in one place. And they're not concentrated in locations, let's just say that. So they're exploitable. But anyway, those, there's so many, like I said, you can just go on and on. The subject of teaching and learning, and I propose that the simple solution is, especially with all this technology, even before the internet, we had the capacity to videotape professors. They did it. They could video the best teachers in the world and just make those videos accessible to anybody and then just pay people to learn the subject matter. The textbooks, some of them, been around 50, 60, 70, 80 years without changing much, but some of the subjects don't change much. That'll work. And it'll work better, It'll get more people educated. It'll motivate more people to do smart things. Smart will be not only a way to get rich, but it'll be so much better than wasting your time, kicking a football or some other bullshit. It'll get you to your life quicker. It'll get you ownership of a house and all kinds of things so much faster. Just a huge, can't see a downside somewhere. Now, the only downside is teachers become useless, and so they have to find some other job. But not a tragedy. But unfortunately, teachers have wives and husbands, and then they have kids, and they have whatever, and a bunch of people start panicking because, they have to change what they're doing. Yeah, it's not a big deal. It's not enough of a unpleasant condition of solution to prevent solution. You got to pay for everything a little bit. It's hard to come up with perfect solutions to any problem. But just like I said, I can't even imagine how somebody can just think for a minute. Okay, if you're paying $150,000, now if you add all the special ed and all the other crap that they throw in, you're probably at $200,000 for one high school graduate, per high school graduate. Ton of money. And realistically, if you just offered that money to kids to pass a GED, you could offer half that much, okay, and you'll get even more value because you'll get so many more participants. You'll get so many more people who would be interested in being financially secure at 15. Yeah, there's going to be a huge incentive for any youth, even especially the ones in the more deprived circumstances, are going to be even more interested, and they're the ones that are the least interested now. It's going to be a lot more compelling than whatever, being a child laborer, working for Uncle whatever for $3 an hour. So much better. Anyway, I didn't see this is where the subject, there's this kind of philosophical subject of, thinking and having a brain. And what does it do really well? Well, yes, it identifies problems and finds solutions. And then you can have some conversation about the problems in having a solution because somebody's going to object to the solution because the solution isn't to their advantage, and blah, 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 blah. And then getting into these specific subjects where it's just demonstrated all over the place. But people can't agree on even problems. I mean, I'd say it's a gigantic, insanely humongous problem that all the world's societies cherish sports, okay, and have absolutely no interest whatsoever in subsidizing or encouraging intellectual advancement. So being a smart whatever, athletically smart versus physically athletic, exercising your mental capacity is not encouraged at all, besides just poopy little words, lip service, and they just throw money at sports. It's just, there's another thing I just observed here is that they have like 59 baseball fields and none of them are used, so they just waste all this money manicuring baseball fields that are used like 25 hours a year. Just pathetic. Doesn't make any sense. It's really stupid. It's stupid. It's a stupid activity. All of these sports are just stupid activities. They just risk health, okay? They don't make people physically healthy. We've been doing this sports thing for the last 30 years, gung-ho, all that crap, and people are just getting fatter and fatter. It's not working, okay? You're not, and so quit wasting money on this. Quit subsidizing this. And encourage young little monkeys to compete as, how well they use their brains to find problems and find solutions. That's what you should be putting bananas in front of. That's what you should be paying them to do, is to become smart people, not physically strong or even just marginally physically healthy. It's just not worth it, especially when you consider some sports just create a bunch of, they end up steroids, they end up all this other bullshit. So it's really quite pointless. It's stupid and cruel in so many ways. Anyway, but yeah, I don't want to do another video about, ragging on Olympics and sports and how stupid all that waste is, and but it's just, it's a clear example of a kind of idiocracy that's been with us for quite a while. So this is one of those things where you say, oh, wait a minute. I shouldn't have grown up in a period of time where it was, nerdy and faggoty and, silly to be a smart person. I mean, that's just crazy that period even existed, right? That it was uncool to be smart. And I'm sure some of that still exists, but I just mean, it's just, what the fuck? It's just so stupid. Oh, I don't know what to say. But see, that's part of the problem. Is that the poster child for intelligence was always some kind of prodigy or some kind of, idiot savant, even, instead of, some normal course kind of thing. And so, frankly, they made the poster child look like an asshole. They put an asshole on the cover of the Smart book, and so, yes, Smart didn't look very good. But obviously, that's a silly problem. It has a simple solution, is don't pretend that Smart requires you to stay in a closet and, concentrate on a subject forever and all that kind of stuff. Because frankly, those people who get immersed too early and too heavily, they don't really, there's not some statistical fact that these prodigies ever become productive. That they actually build on anything. They just win spelling bees at 12 years old, and that's it. So anyway, I'll take a break. So so I don't know. So the video was supposed to be, and it just, but see, that's where it sort of just crashes a little bit, because, it really is all these examples of the identification of problems where half the time we can't agree, and then only about 1/10 of the time can we agree on a solution. So it's just so difficult, because the biggest problem is the lack of communication. So I guess that's probably the bigger subject, is why can't we look at the world and identify the problems the same way? I could say there's too much harm in the world. Would that be, can that be a disagreeable statement? I guess so. Some people will disagree because they have to disagree, because they know the end agenda is some statement they don't agree with, they don't want to have happen. So they can't agree with any of the stuff that leads up to that. Yeah. And I guess they can't accept anything that doesn't fit into the pigeonhole of their religion. And, this goes back to sort of the physics argument also, that the physics won't admit it made mistakes. The science is incapable of accepting that, we have to admit that we're fallible and stupid sometimes. And we can't do that, because then we're not super nerds anymore. They lose their cred. as super geniuses. And they can't accept that diminishment in their, in the way the public. Alright, I appear to be back. So I was, paused the video, and then all of a sudden a problem showed up, and I had to solve it for the last 3 hours. Oh shit. The computer, it freezes kind of often, every 2 days at least, and just usually reboot and everything's okay, and this time now nothing was okay. So after 100 retries or something like that, pull the video card out, pull this, do all this bullshit. It's really buggy. So once it booted, but didn't last too long. Well, anyway, so I gave up, finally. So that was my solution to the problem, was just to say, oh, fuck it. Because my other solution was, okay, go get the computer you pulled out of the garbage and see if you can get it to work. And I mean, I knew it ran. I just wasn't sure whether the video card was going to be compatible with OBS or any of that crap, and it was running Windows and whatever. Anyway, so I put my hard drive in, and that worked. And so then so at least my configuration of Linux was compatible with the new computer. And then I got OBS to work, and just amazing. So I'm back on the garbage computer. I don't think it has as good a processor, but the old computer, I was running it on a video card that's literally this big. It's just nothing. And this one has whatever, 2 feet of video card, which I don't think I really need. And I just don't think it has an i7 processor like the old one. But anyway, it's working, so I'm not going to complain yet. Mostly working. Okay, I can't say for sure. I have to stitch these videos together, so who knows. And you really probably don't need this story, but it's just kind of ironic, okay, that I'm talking about this basic brain function that all we really do is seek problems and find solutions. And I guess I should have stated that we don't have to seek the problems, they show up. And the solutions, again, are, well, what if you just said right from the beginning, okay, you've gotten your 3 years out of your $100 computer, just give it up. It doesn't work that well anyway. Just move on. Get the other computer working and see if it does a better job. Because the old one I couldn't suspend it either, which was sort of annoying. It was either turn it off or leave it running. And it was, it's very low wattage, which was good. So the new one's, higher wattage, which is bad. But if I can suspend it, well, that'll be good. So, good trade-off. But anyway, this is all what you do, right? You have to evaluate your gains and your losses and try to figure out what's the straightest line, what's the most efficient, the less hurtful, the less harmful, the less risky way to get from point A to the point B solution. And it's a task sometimes. So I have to say that this went, as computer issues go, 3 hours isn't that bad, frankly. Converting, getting everything replugged in, unplugging all the cameras and plugging everything. Well, I didn't do all the cameras, but anyway, I do remember this one had some kind of bug where the CPU fan doesn't always turn on, so I have to leave it open so I can spin it if necessary. But anyway, I always have computers open anyway because there's always something you have to pull out or put in or fiddle with. The other issue is this one was kind of dusty, frankly. I let it get a little dustier than I should have, so it might have been my fault. I didn't find anything that was hot, though, so can't say that's the problem. But anyway, back to what I was saying, right? I mean, it's all about me, right? No, sorry. It's just, it is an event. It was, kind of stressful. So, I feel like talking about it. And, I know that's, probably not what I should be doing. But anyway, it was distracting. So we'll pause and gather my whatever wits I have and attempt to get back to the subject. But again, it did fix the subject in a way because I didn't really, I was saying we seek problems, and yes, smart people do that. That's what I've sort of stated, is that's the liability of being smart, is that your brain finds more things that are out of order or not quite correct and attempts to devise solutions. So that's why your life gets kind of miserable. The smarter you are, the more you can see, in a way. And but yeah, I didn't account for the fact that a lot of our problems are things that just get in our way, our continuity, that we are doing a narrative. I have this pattern of making a video at a certain time and doing it a certain way, and the computer was probleming me by saying it's not going to let me do that. You know, and then you have to go through, like I said, this kind of tedious process of, oh, should I get a real light or shall I use a flashlight, or, you know, and you're saying, oh yeah, a real light would be, you know, if it's going to be a 6-hour job, then you should get the real light, and if it's just going to be a half-hour job, then you get to use the flashlight, and you have to do all this judging, all this balancing constantly, as you just attempt to solve the ultimate problem, which is your A to B, which is you and your ambitions, or your aspirations, or your completeness. You know, to get to completeness, you know, that's the problem and the solution. The problem is you're not complete. The problem is got to get to complete. Yeah, that's, you know, and stuff gets in your way, and then you have to evaluate, well, do I really need to be completed, or am I already completed? Can I just say I'm completed, and then I'm completed, and I don't have to bother with this getting completed thing? So why don't I just say I'm finished doing whatever it is I need to do here on earth, and I've completed it, I'm completed, and so now I don't have to fix anything, and I'll just sit here and, you know, you know, wait to die. You know, or jump off a cliff, or do whatever is appropriate to solving the problem of being complete, and therefore done with doing anything, and therefore not having any ambition or desire to play any further. Anyway, pause. That's what I'll do. It's very stressful problems. Yeah, back. So I was thinking, okay, so the idea is, last week I was sort of talking about the conditional part, the part where, okay, you've defined the problem and it's sort of like suffering, and you got to make a harm, and you got to make less of that, and how much harm can you cause to make less harm? And it really is, the equation really is, you know, you have to look at it, and the point is the future. And so then the future becomes something where you have to say, well, is the future 1,000,000 years or 10 years? So it really matters, you know, how much that prevention is going to matter, how many preventions you are going to create, and all of that. So, you know, it's hard to evaluate how many harms you're allowed to cause, because you can't really say how much harm you're going to prevent or spare people from experiencing. And again, so all of these judgments we have to make in this environment of imperfect information, and we have to just do the best we can, being guided by the simple principle that harm is the real enemy, you know, the suffering. And so I did think, you know, I said the word suffering, and, you know, I don't really like the Buddhist statement, you know, life is suffering. It doesn't really say anything, you know, in terms of, you know, all the miseries that come from all kinds of different directions, in terms of your lack of motivation, or boredom, and all the, you know, all the subtle sufferings of existence, and just being completed, even, you know, the whole idea of being completed, you know, finished, actualized, you know, and then you have to say, oh, there's some reason I should tolerate all the crap you have to tolerate, all the noise and bullshit and, you know, tedious shit, when, you know, you're really not all that ambitious. So I was thinking about just the fact that, suffering story, and perspective about, you can tell somebody, somebody can say something's really awful. They have a terrible headache, but from your perspective, it might be just a half a headache or, less, because you've experienced much worse. And so I learned one of those lessons recently where, I've had heartburn before, it's just some kind of little bit of indigestion. You feel a little bit of pain in your chest, blah, blah, blah. No big deal. So I have a pretty bland diet. So I have some little hot peppers in a bottle or whatever. They're not even that hot, I don't think. Well, anyway, so I've been sprinkling that shit on just to give my dinner some capacity to be interesting. And, I started getting these pains like an hour after eating. And, it was the whole, I always sort of didn't take people too seriously that did that whole thing. Oh, I thought I was having a heart attack. But yeah, it's exactly how, it feels like a heart attack. It doesn't feel like indigestion. It just feels like this stabbing, hard pain. And anyway, so I've sort of diagnosed it as being, oh, it's those little peppery things, and it's not in my stomach. It's after the stuff goes into my guts. And my guts are sending a signal saying, fuck you. Don't eat that shit. Something like that anyway. I would imagine that's what's happening. I don't think I have an ulcer or anything. But anyway, it could be a possibility, but I don't think it's, anyway, went through that in my youth. Anyway, so it's another, just one of those points where I thought I understood, and frankly, I really didn't get it. And I guess I would argue that I think there's a lot of that in the world where a bunch of arrogant people who haven't really, had the hard luck are, doing all this selling, when they have no idea what they're selling in terms of what it really comes with, this, really horrible things that can happen. So related to that, earlier in the day when I was thinking about this video, the Russian psycho killer popped into my head. Just because I almost wish I never heard the story. I wish I didn't pay any attention. Just because it's so bad, killing the kids, and he would, shove dirt in their mouth so they couldn't scream, and he, stabs them minorly, so he can manipulate them and abuse them and rape them and do all that shit while they're dying. I mean, it was just so fucking bad. And you're just saying, well, what would be the testimony from one of those 12-year-olds or something about just how bad a day that was? And are we really doing anything here just to make up for it? To say, yeah, that's a price worth paying. Yeah, so what? Some people are broken and terrible things happen, so what? And then the other statement I could make is just the bizarre nature of the fact that so many, people pay so little attention to those horrible things that were really bad death, the slow, miserable, terrible life, and the horrible, awful, slow death, which I saw in the little mongoloid kid that I used to babysit for when I was a kid. His life did not go well. I mean, he only lived to be 18 and had to have a bunch of surgeries because his heart was all fucked up, and, he was sick all the time, and, it was just terrible. Just a horrible, miserable, tormented existence for 18 years. And then people will, get all hysterical because some people on a plane died in 2 seconds maybe, or half a second, or didn't even, their brain is moving too slow to even acknowledge the physics. The physics is going to happen so fast that their brain won't be able to do anything about it or think about it or say, oh, I'm done. Oh, I didn't even get to finish the sentence. You know, and that's always sort of annoyed me. These whatever you call them, crocodile, these fake tears people weep for circumstances that aren't nearly as tragic as the circumstance they didn't even pay attention to, and it's really annoying. It's like some kid, dies slowly of cancer when you're going to school and nobody gives a shit. But somebody commits suicide. Oh, we all have to have, weeping crisis therapy and, have to take a week off and, ridiculous. And I'd say all of that is the byproduct of people doing way too little thinking. And just a bunch of emotional, visceral, reflexive reacting, based on the fact that they're Irish or, some moronic agenda that they think's important, and such. All right, that's a decent enough little bit, so I will pause and be back again. Trying to get to the subject. It's not, it's just that there is a lot to this, the ideal is the straight line. The point is you can't travel the straight line. You have to travel some other line, okay? And it can get quite convoluted, measuring your obligations to the social contract and your obligation to, fairness as by some kind of definition, lots of things like that, and it's really hard to prove, okay, what course of action is actually the straightest possible line that's pragmatically tolerable, acceptable. How many corners can you cut? Yeah, and get away with it. I mean, that's probably the only part that really matters, is what you can get away with, as long as you're right, as long as you actually do get from point A to point B efficiently and such. Alright, so I guess I'll do a little bit on just the distinction between the ephilism and antinatalism in terms of solving this problem of too much suffering, too expensive, okay, too little profit, too much loss, not cost effective, okay, existence. All right, and I would argue that I don't think a lot of these antinatalists could honestly say that, that 99.999999999 keep going forever percent of the problem of too much harm happens in the natural environment. That what humans are doing to each other and to some animals pales, okay, by comparison to the enormous amount of death and harm, pain, suffering being experienced by the animals that cover the substance of the earth, and clearly all of the ocean. Just an insane amount of little sentient brains, eking out an existence. Just a fact. There's an insane amount of them. And if you do some intelligent thinking, you'll realize that yes, they all do have sentient brains, okay, many of them, a huge percentage, well, no, let's not say percentage of living things, let's just say the brain enabled are experiencing consciousness, and they're just doing it ignorantly. And that's the only distinction between us and them. We were ignorant, fact, and And our size of our brain doesn't make us feel more. Okay, the brain isn't by size creating more and more feelings. That would be silly to think. It's a small part of the brain that does the feeling. The big part of the brain is for the thinking. Okay, the feeling is really easy. It's, a simple little button you press. Feeling like shit, feeling good, feel bad, feel good, feel bad. That's not complicated. Obviously, language and doing all of this, that is complicated. And so that's what we need the big brain for, is the more fancy articulation and such, not feeling. So anyway, I'm just saying, so I don't see how they could be, I don't see how you could be rationally philosophical, and have some knowledge of biology and not recognize that, yes, animals are just dumb versions of us, in terms of they're just machines created by the evolution, the biology, and they're just problem solving like us. They're just finding themselves in a situation that they can't get to point B. There's a problem, and they're working a solution to get to point B. And that their desires are much like us, composed substantially by the biology, hunger, thirst, horny, and for the purpose of just producing copies and all of that crap, and that we've made it a more elaborate path that we travel to get there. But you could say that the substance of humans are still very much focused on their satisfying their own physiological condition, making themselves comfortable and not being too concerned about how uncomfortable they make something else in the process. So anyway, let's just assume that most anti-nihilists can go that far. The simple argument is yeah, the point B is you got to fix the natural condition. The natural condition is not acceptable. Okay, it's running, it's leaking oil, the precious oil of suffering. It's spilling it all over the place. Its blood footprint is way out of line. And so you do have to have a solution. You do have to get to point B, which is prevent all of that. Preventing the little tiny human portion, which is a little tiny bit of the, the whole line. And, tiny percentage of the problem. So you have to first diagnose the problem. The problem is suffering, yes. And the substance of that suffering, the Buddhists won't won't inform you, is in the natural circumstance. And so the natural circumstance needs to be modified, needs to be changed, needs to be corrected. And I would argue it just needs to be prevented. It needs to be broken. The cycle of life. And there's lots of ways to do that rationally, where you just say, yes, it's fairly harmless. Again, if all of everything on Earth was zapped out of existence by a gamma ray burst, and in a millisecond the Earth was cinderized, how could you rationally concede, oh, what a tragedy, so much suffering? Oh, wait a minute, there was no suffering. There was no brains in torment. There was no blood. It didn't happen. So it can't logically be described as a tragedy in any way, especially, like I said, if an anti-natalist, they're already saying, yeah, I'm against people continuing to exist forever. So, So anyway, so this argument is just kind of irritating, that people are attempting to say that there's some rational division when the statement is no, the extension of the argument was only for one reason. The only reason why ethylism exists is because too many antinatalists were saying things like, we have to end civilization. Somehow civilization is the terrible, evil thing, and give the planet back to torturing just animals, or returning ourselves to some sort of animal condition even. These are silly philosophies. Okay, so if that's what antinatalism is, some silly human-centric focused philosophy, then yeah, that's, it's far short of what I think the real subject is, which is if you're a harm preventer, you got to know that you're going to have to do your work, not on humans, but on the physics, the way the world works, the actual world, not just the human world. Fixing human culture isn't good enough. It's far short of addressing the real subject of what's really broken. Okay, the real thing that's broken isn't humans. Every animal that would gain intelligence would have the same problem we have. They'd have to go through this whole process of trying to build a culture, trying to create fairness, trying to make deserve have something to do with it, trying to figure out how not to create victims to have your parties, not to have to accept running over a few kids, to get your groceries, all of that kind of crap. So they'd all be stuck, and they'd be stuck with the idea too that they are all individual biological organisms that have a huge incentive. I can feel my pain. I can't feel yours. It creates a huge incentive for me to cheat and think my pain needs addressing and your pain can wait a little while. It's just a fact. They're all anything would have that dilemma to have to deal with, and the hope is that their civilization would get mature enough to have these conversations and to recognize that there are silly little fables about a God fixing everything and creating a little blissful heaven for... You can't even describe what these religions are going to create, right? I mean, the Muslim thing is disgusting. You go to heaven and fuck virgins. I mean, that's not very high-minded. And then the Christians, you don't fuck anything, and you just kind of sit around waiting to just, kiss Jesus's rings or something. I mean, there's just no description. You just admire the gold and the emeralds. Go out to the edge of the cloud and rub the emeralds. Sorry, I'm not interested. You have no memory of your life, no memory of the things you love, no memory of anything. You're just I'm in heaven. Don't know who I am or where I came from. I'm just here to wait in line. So I can't even describe why these lunatics accept this stupid narrative as the truth, because it doesn't make any fucking sense. I mean, it really is so ridiculous that, you're just, oh, Gary, why are you making these videos? People are so fucking dumb that, there's just no way you're going to get through all of that stupid. But again, what choice do I have? I have to get to point B. And the only way I can get to it is through the stupid. I'm going to have to navigate them. I'm going to somehow have to herd the stupid. So I just better get to it. But I don't know how to make videos to stupid. So I have to, I have to devise a plan so I can speak stupid and somehow trick the stupid Because I don't think you can make the stupid smart, so you just have to trick them, I guess. Invent a new religion that, yeah, right, where they just fuck virgins. I mean, it's just so, just the whole idea that you would have a perspective that your reward is to exploit something. Oh, gee, that's heaven. Oh, I went to heaven and got to rape some stuff. Ugh, fuck. Just too ridiculous. So anyway, we'll call this a video. And sorry for the distracting bits, but you know, it happens. Yeah, whatever. Oh. So anyway, that's look. Just this is all this is about. Is just arguing. Point B is we gotta plug the holes in this system. Too much wasted suffering. Just the fact. That's the fact. You don't agree with the fact, then yeah, we'll have to work on that. But if you concede the fact, there's way too much useless, wasted, unnecessary, purposeless, functionalist suffering, then you're just so stupid. But anyway, and yeah, that's all there is to do here. You know, if you want to find a project, you could quilt, you know, or you could save the future from unnecessary suffering. So you have choices, right? You could do some silly thing, or you could do something incredibly valuable, purposeful, nice, wonderful, fantastic. Yeah. So you could be an asshole, or you can try to be useful and good. Yeah. Yeah, so do that. Alright, anyway. So, till the next time, it's such and so forth. And whatnot. Yeah. You know, where I hopefully will not be wrangling computer issues. Alright, hopefully this all stitched together and I can go to bed. Yeah.